My name is Jack Wadsworth. I'm sixth generation related to General Peleg Wadsworth. General Peleg Wadsworth was born in 1748 and he passed away in 1829. Today we're here at Wadsworth Hall that he started building in 1800. It was livable at that time, and he didn't move out here until 1807, and that was the same year that Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was also born. And Henry Wadsworth Longfellow came here to the farm 4 times during the General's lifetime and visited him here and probably stayed overnight and probably got some ideas for poems from this area. So the original house is about 30 by 56, and there are 10 or 11 rooms here. And all of the rooms were heated with just a fireplace. And in the kitchen was a larger fireplace with the crane where you could move the pot over to heat whatever you're cooking over the fireplace. So during the time period when many farms were being built in this area, they liked to build where cold air could drain off, giving a few weeks of frost-free growing weather compared to the low-ground farmsteads. We believe the location of this farmstead was picked because of the proximity to the Saco River, Cranberry Bog, Barnes Brook, and Falls Meadow Brook. All of these were available for water power to run a grist mill or a sawmill. According to the diaries, a valuable resource of timber was available right here near the farm, and that was used, as I mentioned, for building materials and barrel staves for the barrel industry. The original house of 10 or 11 rooms was livable in 1800, which is the front part of the building as we know it now. The first inhabitants were workmen who worked on the land for the General. He and his wife moved to Wadsworth Hall in 1807, as I mentioned. And there's the 6th and 7th and 8th generation living here in the house now that all related back to the General. So it's been passed down through the women's side of the family ever since General Peleg Wadsworth Jr. was here, as his daughter Lusanna Hubbard was influential in adding on the L to the house after the General passed away, and that's about 20 by 50 feet added onto the 30 by 56 area here. So interestingly, the house was built on logs in 1800, and the split stone foundation was added 20 years later, according to the diaries. The cellar was built as a drive-through cellar for a mule and a small cart. Of course, in those days, the cellar was the food pantry for the produce that was grown on the farm. Peleg, always the entrepreneur, was always looking for ways to be efficient in farming and his daily chores. And so the entryway for the cellar was from that side underneath all 3 of these rooms and out that side at the driveway. So the 3 rooms, which we're standing in now, in the front of the house are maintained in the original condition. So this room here is called the Great Hall, and this was used for militia practice. You notice the tall ceiling. This was so they had muskets with bayonets. They could maneuver those in here without hitting the ceiling. It was also used as a classroom. There's an interesting desk here mounted into the side of the wall, which flipped up, and you put 2 posts underneath it for children to study at. And also this was used as a courtroom when deemed necessary. So this room in here was the General Peleg Wadsworth's bedroom, and it had a 4-poster bed. And in this room in here, which has been modernized by Lusanna Wadsworth Hubbard, General Peleg Wadsworth Jr.'s daughter, she wanted to have some wallpaper and plastered ceiling, and so she spiffed up that room. And the wool and flax carpet on the floor, the products are all grown here at the farm, but the flax and the wool were sent into Gorham, Maine, and this early 1800s rug was manufactured in Gorham and brought back out here. So we're out here at the backside of the Wadsworth Hall, and on the backside of the building is a very large woodshed, which they still heat with a lot of wood and wood pellets in the original farmhouse. So prior to using the wood pellet stove, I think they burned, it was typical to burn about 20 cords of firewood a year, running your kitchen stove, your parlor stove, and possibly a stove sit-down cellar, but I don't think this house has a stove in the cellar. Some of the outbuildings out here, we have a couple of chicken coops, kind of used in the summertime for raising a few hens. This building here in the native boards, original building, was the cooper shop. That cooper shop is about 15 by 30 feet, and it was used to make barrel stave. Susie Moulton tells me that they didn't make barrels here, but they took the staves into Portland to be utilized to make barrels with. But they had a sawmill set up on Falls Meadow Brook here, which sawed out short pieces, like 8-foot pieces of logs, and they made barrel staves by cutting up those pieces. So that was the original cooper shop. The structure that we're in here was a 40 by 80 barn that was built in about 1830. An original barn right out in front of the house actually was struck by lightning and burnt sometime prior to 1830. And the carriage shed that we see here was used for storage of carriages over the years. And after the 1947 forest fire, when some timber had to be cut to salvage the timber, Margaret Douglas had a little extra money, and so she was able to fix this up into a hen pen, and she raised 600 hens every year for the commercial market, as well as use for themselves for their own eggs. And then around the corner is the original ice house, which they don't have to use anymore. So next to the cooper shop is a sap house. Of course, many years ago, everyone tried to grow everything and use everything that they could off the land. So quite a few sugar maple trees in the area. So starting way back, they tapped these trees and boiled down their sap to make maple syrup to use in the household products. So we're standing in front of the Deering pine. The Deering pine was planted May 6 in 1939 by Dean Deering. He was the head of agriculture at the University of Maine, and he found out about the farm down here sometime in his career at Orono, and he was very enamored by this place and coming here. So he planted this pine May 6, 1939, and May 6 in 1748 was the birth date of General Peleg Wadsworth, so it was to commemorate his birthday. The split stones that you see all around here, Peleg Wadsworth had those quarried in Freiburg. They brought them down here in ox cart, and he put them up early on at the beginning of raising this building here. So this pine is probably about 350 years old. The family calls it a king's pine. We're not definitely sure if this was ever marked by the British for a mast tree, but the University of Maine measured this tree in 1968, and at that time it had 4,000 board feet of lumber in the tree. It was 120 feet tall and 38 feet to the very first limb. Measured the tree a few years ago, and it's about 52 inches in diameter now, and probably is approaching somewhere towards 5,000 board feet of total lumber in the tree. The 47 fire just barely touched the tree and made a little seam on the back side, but the tree is still healthy to this day.
How did they fell this tree and get it down out of this tiny brook and into the Saco River?
Well, I have seen pictures of how they moved these giant trees. Was because they had to swamp a very smooth road, and they had really huge carts, really huge wheels, and they suspended these underneath those huge wheels, like they're 8 foot tall, 8 foot diameter wheels, and they would chain the tree to that and then haul it out with horses or oxen and put it into the river and float it down the Saco.
And then, as time went on, my mother was not well at all, and she said, for example, go take those people around the front room, Susie, for me, and I'll give you 10 cents for every tour you do. No, and I did gladly. And I met a lot of people who had the same appreciation and sentiments that I do, and I guess that's about it. And
You've lived there for a long time.
yes,
As a child?
all the time.
Yeah.
The only time I ever moved was when my husband and I were married, and that was 2.5 miles away.
To Moulton,
Yes.
on the Notch Road.
Yep. And we raised our family there from infants up, and then when the youngest child, Amy, was about 16, we moved out here, partly because my father had passed away and my mother needed some help, and this was the answer to a dream, as far as I was concerned, to come back here at my birthplace, my beloved home, and start all over again, or continue, I should say. And I'm a very sentimental person, and just love the surroundings and the history of the house and everything inside it and outside it.